Justin Trudeau in Canada is still dealing with the fallout of hosting and cheering a Nazi in the Canadian Parliament. Canada was so embarrassed, they are now extraditing the Nazi they just celebrated to Poland. We got him. This was such an embarrassing moment that Canada is now giving up the Nazi that they've been sheltering until he was the tender age of 98. Now Canada and Western officials are forced to give the funniest apology I ever heard in my life. Oops, I accidentally cheered for a Nazi, my bad. Another country apologizing is Germany for having the Germany ambassador to Canada at the event cheering a Nazi. A newly militarized Germany cheering on a Nazi. Not a good look. You have Justin Trudeau handling this as well as you expect he would. Justin Trudeau is blaming Russian disinformation for the fact that his government cheered on a Nazi war criminal. Fucking Russian disinformation tricking us into cheering for Nazis in our government. Not our fault we are collaborating with Nazis in Ukraine. The Russians tricked us. How dumb do they think we are? Those guys and Nazis were never defeated. They was absorbed by the West.
What's poppin'? My friends, my family, welcome back. Welcome back to RBN Thursday Live. Nick in the afternoon. Nick at noon. Depending on what your time zone is. What's poppin', my friends? I've been having a great time with this story. Probably one of the funniest stories that happened this year. There was Canadian officials who said this was probably the most embarrassing moment in Canadian history. Because not only did they fuck up for Canada, you have Russian media that is having a field day with this. Russian media is completely having a field day with this for good reason. Because as we've seen with Operation Paperclip, as we see with multiple officials covering up for and cheering for a Nazi in the Canadian Parliament, Nazism wasn't truly defeated. They was absorbed by the West, as I said there. Which isn't surprising because we mentioned and we talked about it before how Nazis was inspired by who? They was inspired by the United States in their actions against indigenous Americans. So that there always been a connection there. And Russia always viewed it as their duty to slay these Nazi and NATO scum. And that's why majority of the Russian people support the Russian military special operation in Ukraine. One thing that's happening is the Ukrainian military is getting demolished. Denazification is happening. So Canada is deeply embarrassed because by them celebrating a Nazi, they've validified the claims that will come out of Russia and many anti-imperialists who've been paying attention that the West side with Nazis, and like Tomas said, they also side with fascism. What's poppin', my friends? Chess Mom says, I think Canada is going to double down on their Nazi love. I got some interesting follow-up regarding this story. We got to cover that before we have our guest, Liam from the Grayzone. He joined us today around the 30-minute mark. Well, I'm going to be clear. Canada isn't happy about this event because, once again, this is a propaganda win for the Russians. This is a giant propaganda loss for the West. And they already are losing the PR battle on the global stage and among the United States. Ukraine support dropped by, it was around minus 30 compared to last year. And because of this, fam, heads are rolling. Heads are rolling because of this decision. Canada's House Speaker has stepped down after inviting a Nazi veteran to Parliament. Heads are starting to roll. Now, this is the video of him resigning.
Speak your attention. Have your attention. Order. It's with a heavy heart that I rise to inform members of my resignation as Speaker of the House of Commons. It has been my greatest honor as a parliamentarian to have been elected by you, my peers, to serve as the Speaker of the House of Commons for the 43rd and 44th Parliament. I have acted as your humble servant of this House carrying out the important responsibilities of this position to the very best of my abilities. Je tiens à vous remercier.
I would like to thank you, my colleagues, for your support.
So you have this guy being thrown to the wolves because he's obviously blamed for booking this Nazi who literally fought for a Nazi unit and that exterminated Jews and Polish people. That's why you had multiple Jewish organizations that was furious at this, correct? And they want to pretend that, oh, we didn't know. You had the German ambassador to Canada that was there and cheering, and people was calling for their resignation. The German Interior Ministry is defending her, saying, oh, we didn't know. She didn't know that she was cheering on the Nazi. Fam, they honored this man in front of Canadian Parliament when they had Zelensky there. Is anyone dumb enough to truly believe that they didn't know who this guy was? They 100%, without a doubt, know exactly who this guy was. And I am of the opinion this is the slow rolling psyop that the West is rolling out to get us to be 100% okay in accepting of Ukrainian Nazis. Rehabilitate and whitewash Nazism. They're doing the same thing to George W. Bush Republicans who rack up quite an astonishing body count themselves, right? So they knew what they were doing, but this was a PR disaster because I don't think they knew the amount of backlash they will get because of this event. They thought this could be just another example of them whitewashing Nazis because Canada have a history of that. They've been sheltering this guy until he was, as I mentioned before, the tender age of 98, right? Now, as I mentioned, they are extremely upset and embarrassed because of this situation, so much so that Canada, after protecting this guy for a very, very long time, they are now moving to extradite him to Poland now. Look at this. Poland moves to extradite Ukrainian SS veteran who was applauded in Canada. Applause for the 98-year-old Jaroslav Hunka was deeply embarrassing for Canada, said Justin Trudeau. Now, Justin Trudeau, as I covered in the hotspot video, him and the entirety of Canada is in shambles. So here's the video of Justin Trudeau blaming the fact that the West is whitewashing Nazis. They are honoring Nazis. They're blaming it on Russian disinformation. This is clown shit, fam.
Obviously, it's extremely upsetting that this happened. The speaker has acknowledged his mistake and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and by extension to all Canadians. I think particularly of Jewish MPs and all members of the Jewish community across the country who are celebrating commemorating Yom Kippur today. I think it's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation, and continue our steadfast and unequivocal support for Ukraine, as we did last week with announcing further measures to stand with Ukraine in Russia's illegal war against it.
Western leaders realize at this point that liberals' Putin derangement syndrome is so bad. Their xenophobic rage towards the Russian people is so unhinged that all Justin Trudeau has to do is to blame Putin or any Western leader. All they have to do is blame Putin for any mistake that they make. And they will eat it right up. You guys were caught in 4K justifying what we've been saying, that the NATO and the West have been rehabilitating Nazis. The Russian claim that there's a Nazi problem in the West. The West is becoming Nazi collaborators by arming anti-Russian insurgents in Ukraine. And not only Ukraine, throughout the globe. And they are laying it out as an existential threat, as it is, because if I had Nazis arming up and they was violent next to my border, I'll be fucking upset about that too. So you guys are justifying the talking points. That's why heads has to roll. That's why heads have to roll. Here's another example. Justin Trudeau still blaming Russia for Canada's decision to apply the Nazi. He's still doing it.
I also want to reiterate how deeply sorry Canada is for the situation this put President Zelensky and the Ukrainian delegation in. It is extremely troubling to think that this egregious error is being politicized by Russia and its supporters to provide false propaganda about what Ukraine is fighting for.
So I was reading Russian media. I like to read oppositional media all the time. And they are having an absolute fucking field day with this. I have a friend who also lives in Russia who was telling me, like, man, they are telling the story of this 98-year-old Nazi and how Justin Trudeau is propping them up all over Russia. They're not telling the story in Western media, but in Russia they are, right? That's why 80% of the Russian people support Putin in the military operation, because every single Russian person knows a grandparent or a grandparent cousin or whatever that was killed by the Nazis. So there's plenty of evidence, as we've seen here with the West buddying up with Nazis, that's going to light a fire under their belly, right? The same way that's in the Klan hood lights a fire under my belly, right? Fiorella is a friend of the show from the Convo Couch. She lives in Moscow. Not exactly. I don't want to burn my source. Not exactly Fiorella though. I don't want to burn. The boy getting sources out here, fam. Big shout out to Hotspot. They've been helping me produce these videos. They produce a lot of great media. The next segment we're going to cover is the clown show or the GOP debate. Not any clips from 95% of it. 95% of it was wasted time. The GOP debate is straight up trash. You have presidential candidates, fam. Actually, I'll put this up here a little bit later. You have presidential candidates. People are running to be commander-in-chief. The number one thing that the president controls is foreign policy. Correct. Any cultural war questions to a president is a waste of time. Now, especially considering your party is supposed to be a party of small government. That's the whole idea, the Republican and conservative idea. So the idea that you're being asked about cultural war questions in the first place is ridiculous. What are you going to do? Establish an executive order on trans kids? Establish an executive order on X culture war, this culture war? Isn't that big government, nanny state government? Isn't that big nanny state government that conservatives claim they hate? Right? Even on a lot of the domestic policy issues, they were talking about things that Congress and Senate controls, which presidents can throw around their weight to influence and lobby Congress and Senate, correct? But at the end of the day, that's the legislative branch. The president is the commander-in-chief in charge of our military, especially considering Congress abdicated their responsibility to declare war and approve of war. That's what John Lewis and many Democrats helped do. They helped accomplish. That's the Democrats. And I'm sure a lot of neocon Republicans teamed up with them. They did that so Obama and Hillary Clinton can destroy Libya without congressional approval. So now, even more than ever, the president is 100% in charge of foreign policy. But despite that, there's barely any time spent on the debate about foreign policy. Out of the 2-hour insufferable debate with those deeply unserious clowns running to either have a Trump cabinet position or running to be a part of MSNBC, only 15 minutes or so was spent on foreign policy. And then the times that China was mentioned, it wasn't even like mentioned on the premise of what you would do as president. It was like attacking VVAC for having business dealings in China, for example. Literally making up this extremely false rhetoric that Biden is weak on China, even though Biden sent nuclear submarines to Australia, he sent nuclear submarines to South Korea. He influenced the Japanese government to remilitarize. remember, Japan as a society demilitarized after their crimes and of Imperial Japan. Those that the far right party in Japan always didn't like that. They always opposed the idea that we're supposed to apologize for imperialism. That's what the politics of Shinzo Abe was. The former Japanese prime minister who was assassinated, great friend of Nira Tanden and the Democratic Party. They were Japanese nationalists who they was always upset that Imperial Japan ended. They never apologized for the crimes they did in China as well. They never apologized for the war crimes. That's why a lot of people didn't mourn Shinzo Abe when he died. But that ruling class party is more than happy to do the bidding of the United States to remilitarize Japan. So despite all this stuff that the United States is doing to get the Indo-Pacific rallied up against China, put military bases all around them, they're even trying to establish peace with Vietnam to pull them out of China, but it's not being that successful. Despite all that, you have the Republicans that are pretending weak on China and essentially producing absolutely unhinged policies that will only escalate a giant war against China that would destroy the global working class. But despite how unserious the debate was, we're going to cover the few clips I grabbed of maybe 10 minutes of them discussing foreign policy. And now the job is in here because the establishment, especially on the right, is terrified of anti-NATO Republicans like Vivek Ramaswamy. They know that it's not that Vivek is brilliant, right? We clown him on the show all the time. Is that the pro-NATO talking points are so weak, you can't have a debate about it. If you have a debate about it, it goes horrific for the establishment, which Fox News is all for the Ukraine war. That's why they fired Tucker Carlson, because Tucker Carlson was speaking out against that war. They even spoke up with black socialists who was on the pro-Russian side. And Tucker Carlson said, yeah, I like those people now. And now they fired him because it was 100% ideological. The dumbest people in the planet are the liberals who believe that Fox News fired Tucker Carlson because of his stance on social issues, as they have an entire lineup of bigots. That is not what Tucker Carlson was fired for. He was fired because he spoke out against the Ukraine war quite aggressively. So Fox News having this position, they're not going to allow him to debate Ukraine that long. So that's a long preface. So let's get into this first exchange, and I'm going to break it down.
Finish that exchange. We have to level with the American people. We have to level with the American people on this issue. The reality is just because Putin is Putin's an evil dictator does not mean that Ukraine is good. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties.
A win
that has
for Russia is a
that
win
is not
for
true.
China.
We're driving Russia.
A win for Russia is a win for China.
Excuse me, if you have
but
a chance,
I forgot you like China. That's why
you'll have your chance in just a moment.
Yeah.
The hurling personal insults isn't helping. China is the real enemy, and we're driving Russia further into China's arms. We need a reasonable peace plan to end this, especially this is a country whose president just last week
Vivek,
was
if you
hailing
let
Putin
have Ukraine, that's a green light to China to take Taiwan.
We need a
Peace comes through strength.
We need a reasonable plan to peace.
Governor Christie.
The Communist Party of China is the real enemy.
Governor Christie. Governor Christie. President Biden's first two.
So remember how the debate moderators usually care so much about interrupting and stopping people from interrupting other candidates because we won't hear their argument? Isn't it very funny that how that rule doesn't apply to Ukraine? This is the second time they have done this. We know because we did a live stream covering both debates. The second time where they was talking about the issue of Ukraine, Vivek is speaking, and the moderators allow the neocons in the debate to interrupt them without saying anything. They don't give Vivek his time back. They don't even try to stop Mike Pence and Nikki Haley from doing those unhinged interrupting. They do that because they don't want the audience to hear Vivek's argument. Once again, you guys know I think Vivek is a clown, especially his solution on the Ukraine war, driving China and Russia, who have a no limits partnership away. That's ridiculous. But the NATO position is so bad, anyone who is against NATO will sound like a genius by comparison. So Vivek Ramaswamy would, if given the opposition, destroy Nikki Haley and Mike Pence with a ridiculous talking point. For one, Mike Pence, he says, if we allow Russia to take Ukraine, which I cannot emphasize enough, never been the goal of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin wanted to denazify, demilitarize their fascist regime, also prevent NATO from expanding into Ukraine as the West agreed to in the 90s. That is not Putin taking Ukraine. In fact, what he called for was the independence of the Odessa and Donbass regions, which is not even taking those into Russia control. That is what a lot of people in eastern Ukraine wanted, but Russia decided they're not going to do that. They just want to grant them independence from Ukraine. And not Russia taking Ukraine, but they have to lie in order to sell this bullshit. That's why they're not allowing anyone with the anti-NATO position to speak. So let's play this again. I might take it one by one. I wanted the whole clip to play without interrupting. So I almost want to take it piece by piece because there's so much to say here. Let's see what we can
finish that exchange. We have to level with the American people. We have to level with the American people on this issue. The reality is just because Putin
Why is he allowed to interrupt them now?
is not Putin's an evil dictator does not mean that Ukraine is good. This is a country.
For one, this guy loves Trump. So once again, we're taking piece by piece now. If you love Trump, how can you say that Putin is an evil dictator? You guys think Putin's kill count is anywhere near the kill count of the average Republican, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Joe Biden? Absolutely not. So once again, weak shit by Vivek. Once again, Vivek not great on this issue. But you don't have to be a starch anti-imperialist who minds decolonized to destroy these NATO puppets.
That has banned 11 opposition parties.
A win
that has
for
actually,
Russia is a
that
win
is not
for
true.
China.
We're driving
a win
Russia.
For Russia is a win for China.
Excuse me, if you have a chance.
A win for Russia is a win for China. The only thing that was accomplished by the foreign policy that you support, Nikki Haley, which is essentially the foreign policy of Joe Biden, was to drive China and Russia together. Was to weaken the alliances that the United States have with many of the BRICS countries, with India, for example, who their relationship has been strained. That's why you see a lot more, even though like Obama was friends with Moody, the establishment was friendly with Moody, you see a lot more establishment speaking out on him because he's not 100% going along with the NATO talking points. Right? So that just unhinged neocon garbage that it does not serve the people at all. It doesn't serve an anti-war movement at all. Nikki Haley, as we said yesterday, was by far the most unhinged candidate on the stage. And I'm talking about in terms of what the commander-in-chief can control, Nikki Haley was the craziest person on the stage. And of course, you want to know who people like the best? Nikki Haley. I'm talking about the liberals, the neocons, the corporate media. They were saying this is a great debate by Nikki Haley. Meanwhile, me and CJ are watching Nikki Haley in horror. Like, the fuck is this? Let's finish the clip.
You like China. That's why
you'll have your chance in just a moment. Yeah. The hurling personal insults isn't helping. China is the real enemy, and we're driving Russia further into China's arms. We need a reasonable peace plan to end this, especially this is a country whose president just last week
Vivek,
was
if you
hailing
let
a Nazi
Putin have Ukraine, that's a green light to China to take Taiwan.
We need a
peace comes.
Repeat after me, fam. Taiwan is a part of China. That is recognized by NATO. That is recognized by the United States. 80% of the Taiwanese people was polled and say they want the established order. They want the status quo. Now, there are a lot of Taiwanese people who are not fans of the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, right? But business is good. They work together in a cooperative manner. China allowed them to have independence, but they're still part of China. And that is status quo that the Taiwanese people support. That's why the Taiwanese Separatist Party took L's in the last two elections. But anyway, that's unhinged nonsense by Pence, who stands no chance in this. Remember, Mike Pence cares more about fighting the war with Russia than he cares about the state of the American city. So after that quote, he's not only done in the general election, he's definitely done in the Republican primary. Now, this is another clip I want to get to. Remember, we have Liam Cosgrove from the Grayzone that joined us. And I remember when we did our live stream coverage of this, when I heard that Tim Scott say this, I'm like, man, I can't believe you just said the quiet part out loud. So I listened to this second clip. We only got two clips because, once again, they didn't talk about foreign policy. They spent like 5 minutes. They spent 5 minutes on foreign policy. The rest was like just random digs at China. Well, not like policy, but random digs. So listen.
Not a territorial dispute. It's never been a territorial.
And I'm sorry, but Nikki Haley says there is not a territorial dispute. You have the NATO chief that quite literally admitted that NATO expanded to provoke this war with Russia. That Russia had an agreement with NATO. If NATO don't expand to Ukraine, they won't wage a war. And the NATO chief said, no, I decided I'm not signing that. So it is a territorial dispute. It's about whether NATO can encroach into Ukraine or not. Whether the West should be able to violate Russian sovereignty, break the Minsk Accords, all these agreements that the West had before. So whenever you see these neocons, these people claim that it's not a territorial dispute, that is a bold-faced, aggressive lie. That is quite literally all this is about, because you had Odessa and Eastern Ukraine that do not want to be part of Ukraine anymore after the Maidan coup, after the Odessa massacre, where you have fascists and Nazis in Ukraine slaughtered 80 union workers, right? So they didn't want to be part of Ukraine no more. They had a referendum where they wanted to be independent. A lot of people in Eastern Ukraine wanted to be part of Russia. So now this was completely unacceptable to the Zelensky regime, considering the resources and the amount of their economy. I believe around 40% that was in Odessa in Eastern Ukraine. So they couldn't have them leave the country. So they demanded them using fascist Nazi violence to stay in Ukraine, which any separatist protest movement, anyone who wanted to be part of Russia was violently snuffed out, which led to 14,000 Ukrainians being killed in the civil war of Ukraine. Very deeply divided country, right? So it is 100% a territorial dispute. I just want to make that clear.
Dispute.
And 90% of the resources that we send over to Ukraine is guaranteed as a loan. It is not 90% of the money that we send over there is loan. What we can.
So I can't believe it. Like, Republicans are so desperate because they're losing their voting populace. They're just saying the quiet part out loud. We talked about before how BlackRock is about to own Ukraine. You have Western financial institutions that are about to carve Ukraine up. And the Ukrainian oligarchs will benefit from it, but not the Ukrainian people. And remember, the talking points you're hearing right now and the talking points you're about to hear are the talking points that the NATO left, AOC and Bernie Sanders. They hear this shit and they are still 100% on board, knowing that this is just a BlackRock military-industrial complex strategy in order to increase their profits and have a way to test their military equipment, which they have admitted before. They admitted that Ukraine is an amazing learning opportunity, amazing playground, a battlefield to test weapons and new modern technology. So if you're one of the dumb people in the NATO left, which I believe is malice at this point, because they have way enough time to actually learn about this issue. If you actually believe the United States is in Ukraine in some sort of anti-imperial pursuit in a way to save the Ukrainian people, you are among the dumbest people in political discourse if you believe that. And that is legitimately what Marianne Williamson brings to the table. That is literally what Matt Duss believes. That is literally what AOC and Bernie Sanders believe. Meanwhile, here is Tim Scott telling you the real reason. We benefit at the cost of Ukrainian lives.
To Ukraine is guaranteed as a loan. It is not 90% of the money that we send over there is loan. Well, we can talk about this, but at the end of the day, 90% of the money that we send over there is actually in the form of a loan. It's not actually not be paid by Ukraine. It's paid by the NATO or NATO allies.
So I think it's a good topic.
I think it's a really good topic too. But I will say let's debate the fact that our national vital interest is in degrading the Russian military. By degrading the Russian military, we actually keep our homeland safer, we keep our troops at home, and we all understand Article 5 of NATO.
We have to level with the American people.
I thought you said something about waiting until your turn to talk. So at the end of the day,
no, finish. Bro, you guys see how they interrupted Vivek. That's why Vivek is interrupting him now. So Vivek is not allowed to speak, but Tim Scott gives his pro-war monologue.
I'll be happy to
Go
debate
ahead, and I'll respond.
I'll look forward to this one right now. So at the end of the day,
think about
the fact, if you want to keep American troops at home, attack on NATO territory would bring us and our troops in. By degrading the Russian military, we reduce, if not eliminate, an attack on
If I
NATO
may
territory.
finish that exchange, we have to level with the American people. We have to level with the American people on this issue. The reality is just because Putin is.
You guys see how he start interrupting immediately again. So do you guys really, do anyone really believe that that's not coordinated? That Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, all these neocons are not told by somebody somewhere that you interrupt Vivek when he speak regarding Russia? Now let's get into this unhinged clip. So for one, you have Tim Scott talking about the real reason why we're in Russia, how much the military-industrial complex benefit, how we have loans that essentially BlackRock and many other financial institutions own. And he mentions how the point of Ukraine is degrading the Russian military. So now you know for a fact that things are going so bad for Ukraine that they now change the objective. Because at first they were like, well, let's defeat Russia. Now it's about degrading the Russian military at the cost of, once again, how many Ukrainian lives? And is it even working? The act of degrading the Russian military. Welcome, Liam. I'll see you in the back. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Our guest, a fantastic reporter for the Grayzone, is going to join us. I'll introduce you here in the next minute or so. But did degrading the Russian military work? You have, I saw a speech, a translated speech by Putin, where he was talking about how because of this war that they're essentially waging against NATO and the Nazi scum, that their military industrial complex is firing on all cylinders, right? You got Russian defense budgets that being increased by 70% in 2024. So this idea that the Russian military is being degraded, is that actually working? I would argue I don't think it is. You want to know what's happening? U.S. stockpiles are being depleted. Germany's stockpiles are being depleted. European weapon stockpiles are being depleted. You have NATO allies that say, we can't supply Ukraine with more weapons because we're out. So I don't know the answer to this question, but it seems like you have militaries in the West that are being degraded, not Russia's. You have, I didn't save this, but I'm gonna see if I can find it. You had a Russian, I had a report on this. I actually didn't save this, but the Russian economy is set to grow. Here it is. I found it. Thank God. I hate when I do. I hate when I accidentally forget to save a receipt. But look, the Russian economy expected to grow despite Ukraine war fallout. Now, despite the fact that the Russian economy is about to grow, you have Western economies that are in shambles. You have the German economy that was once, as stated here, once the envy of the world, now the worst performing major developed economy. So now compare this to Russia. Compare this to what is going on with Russia. Russia's economy is growing. Even Western media officials have to admit this now. Russia's economy is expected to grow despite Ukraine war fallout. The country defying expectations and weathering sanctions, but an eventual slowdown is still expected. They've been saying that for months, fam. Listen to this. And the Western cope is fantastic when you read this. Damn, green tea is amazing. Russia's economy will unexpectedly grow this year despite the war in Ukraine, according to a new forecast. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development estimates the Russian economy will see a 1.5% growth. Now let's compare this to some headlines you're seeing in Europe, where you have the Germany went from an envy of the world to the worst performing major economy. What happened? The loss of cheap gas from Russia. Maybe that played a part of it, as this article was forced to admit. And then they're trying to downplay it. One last thing, I'll bring my guests in. I appreciate you for being patient here. The UK economy hit by renewed signs of stress as growth slows. Pound at 6-month low. And they're just scratching the surface about what the UK is going through right now. So what to say, I think I end my presentation there. Everything they said about this proxy war from the West, up is down. Everything they say is false. So I want to bring my guest, an amazing investigative reporter for the Grayzone. We had Liam Cosgrove. Thank you for making time. Thank you for joining us on RBN. Great to have you on.
Of course, man. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I follow the Grayzone, and I always love the work that you guys do. I especially love the work that you've been doing recently, calling out what I deemed, and I call in an oxymoronic way, the NATO left. We're going to cover your call out of the AOC, but I was talking about the state of the Ukraine war. I want to get your general thoughts, because the idea was we're going to wage this economic war against Russia, that we're going to win this war against Russia. And you have reports I am reading, I'm not making this up, that shows that Russia's economy is about to grow. You have Germany, you have the UK that's struggling. So what is your overall take on the Ukraine war and the West strategy thus far?
My overall take on the Ukraine war is that it's insane. The fact that we are risking nuclear war for, the Crimea and the Donbass, which you can look at U.S. government polling from back in the day. You can also look at kind of pro-Western Ukraine polling, and it shows that both of those regions want to secede from Ukraine. So from my perspective, we should just let them secede. I mean, that's kind of our policy on Taiwan, right? I mean, our official policy on Taiwan is the one China policy, but you hear politicians talk about how, we can never let China take Taiwan. So for some reason, we're for secession in that case, and we're against secession in the case of Crimea and the Donbass. And on your point of economic war, I would love it if our engagement, we already have some military engagement sort of, with like directing where they giving them intel for fighting their war and stuff, and reports of even some U.S. personnel there on the ground. So, but I hope this maintains our involvement on the economic front. I think, Russia seems to have been resilient. I don't know the details really on how the economy is actually doing. I think.
Yeah, I just take people's word for it. They say it's going to grow. I'm like, I don't know how that's possible, but it is.
It could grow nominally. I mean, this is like a thing that I've always hated that the U.S. talks about, a wartime economy. Like in high school, I was taught about a wartime economy. Like, the GDP actually went up because we were making all these ships. And sure, there's a nominal when you pivot the industrial base to make weapons, and then Raytheon puts a big price sticker on it. Okay, your nominal GDP just went up, but did the people of the country get wealthier? No, because the resources all went into weapons, which actually destroyed things. So everyone got poorer. So I think that's a bunch of BS. That could be what they're referring to. I don't know. But either way, Russia seems to be resilient in that, India's still buying natural gas and stuff like that from them. And so is China. So I think I also subscribe to the slogan that, when goods should cross borders, because when goods don't cross borders, soldiers do. I think trade is good. I think our sanctions regime, the U.S. has become addicted to sanctions over the last couple of decades, and it's not.
Isn't it like 2/3 of the world's population is under sanctions, something like that? Something
I didn't
crazy.
know. Is that true? Yeah, I mean that's like when you.
Let me fact check myself, but I heard something crazy like that.
Yeah, I mean if that's true, that's wild, and it's sad to see. And
1/3.
Okay, 1/3. I mean that's still insanely high, and it's way too high. And you think about initially that kind of stuff can work, when the first couple times you do it. But the more and more you do it, it's almost like kind of argument and debate. If you're, which is true of a lot of these people on the left and kind of the neocon rhino types, is they refuse to talk to who they view as fringe, and they're like, I would never talk to that person. I don't want to, give any credence to what they're saying. It works the first couple of times, but the more you do that, you're just isolating yourself into a smaller audience. And the U.S. here is isolating itself into a smaller pool of people who are actually willing to trade with it. It can only hurt us in the long run. I mean, we benefit from getting cheap goods from China. It's actually a pretty good deal for us, and we should not be poking the bear that provides us with so many of our goods. I mean, it's insanity. The rhetoric that's going around China. And the same could be true of Russia. I mean, the idea that we trade oil with Saudi Arabia, but for some reason it's totally off limits for Russia.
Yeah.
It's as if Saudi Arabia has this great human rights track record, with what they're doing in Yemen.
Yep.
It's so insane. And I mean, that's just what they say in public. So behind the scenes, they're thinking there's some, geopolitical strategic value for it, but that strategic value could still exist with Russia. There's no reason, we couldn't have allied with them and prevented this war in the first place, allied with them when they offered
Absolutely.
to help fight ISIS and stuff like that, which is another thing. I mean, we helped create ISIS. So not that I'm pro, however the US government wants to fight ISIS. I just mean there are so many ways that we could ally with these countries. And, I don't know. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes that drives these animosities. I think a lot of it's kind of Cold War relics, like, guys like John McCain who never got past the Cold War and just hate Russia with an animosity, this irrational animosity. That could be where it comes from. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely deep-seated Russophobia. That's how they're able to trick, especially people who consider themselves to be like progressive liberals, into cheering for war. And what you said about trade is a great point, because when you have countries and regimes that do stuff that make me disgusted, right? Obviously, I'm still anti-war. So, what is the answer? Still in the military end? Absolutely not.
Of course.
Absolutely. So, and I want you, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Because my thing is like, and it's not going to happen because we ruled and dictated by psychopaths. But the best thing you can really do to influence a culture to respect human rights, respect the dignity of life, is to, for one, uphold those values yourself as a country. So you got to clean up your own domestic policy and lead by example. But by opening trade and open relationships, having the free movement of people between countries, normalizing each other's cultures, I think you can have influence on otherwise cultures that may be off on human rights. I think that's the answer, instead of relying on might makes right imperialism that only have the opposite effect, like the war on terror and increasing terrorism. Just for a second, Tom, I want to show you guys this. I want to show you. You have anything you want to add real quick?
I couldn't have said that any better. That's totally spot on. I think about that all the time. If you really want to make China less authoritarian, keep trading with them, keep sending your diplomats over there, have the conversation. And then you also have to lead by example, because or else your statements are just hollow. Yeah, that was very well said. I mean, dialogue is how you change. We're not going to go to war with China, another nuclear power. So the only option that we could have left, I mean, a war would be devastating to everyone. So the only other option is dialogue. It's like, it's persuasion, which is through, voluntary exchange of goods.
Whenever people say, you got to see what Russia do to this journalist or freedom press, do you see what China does to the freedom press? I'm like, you see what the United States does to Julian Assange?
Yeah.
Right? That's always my first response, because our goal is to lead by example. We're not leading by example. Who are you to call out another country, especially when you live in the heart of evil in the empire? I want to get your thoughts on this too, because there are quite a few things I want to cover with you while I have you here. This is the receipt. I'm gonna read it again for you guys to see, because I misspoke earlier, but it's 1/3, which is still crazy. We sanction 1/3 of the world's people, and that's something that the NATO left and progressive Democrats, they just think it's fine. Like, oh yeah, they do sanctions. I think like sanctions been one of the most harmful actions to humanity in my lifetime. Like when you look at how many Iraqis will starve. But anyway, I go on another rant. Let me move on.
100%.
Let's I saw this headline. I want to get your thoughts on this, because this shows how deep
on the sanctions there real quick. It incentivizes the eruption of things like BRICS, I mean, these other countries have banded together, and they say the dollar is so volatile because we never know when we're going to get sanctioned. We need something else. So you're incentivizing people to get off of your system, which, so there's another point that's not good for them and for us.
So that's just a fantastic point. I want to get your thoughts on this. These are a few stories I wanted to cover today. And the reason why the American people are turning against the Ukraine war, there was like a -30 drop compared to last February, which is devastating, especially considering the propaganda, is that we see that Maui victims are only getting $700 per household, as the United States government is paying for the salary of Ukrainian government officials. They literally subsidizing small businesses and paying for the healthcare of Ukrainian people. And they do this lockdown political theater every few months, every year or so. And they always say, well, there's going to be a government shutdown, and this is going to hurt so many poor people. Working class government employees are going to be hurt by this government shutdown. That's why we must install and implement austerity politics to prevent that from happening. So you guys see, as our government shutdown is looming, despite the fact that we are having a government shutdown, we're still going to be paying the salaries of 1,000 Ukrainians during this hypothetical government shutdown. So doesn't it show how corrupt this is? Liam, do you have any reaction to this?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's wild. I literally, not even probably 30 minutes ago, I was just asking the Pentagon about this, and they kind of blew it off and said, you know, we don't really deal with the humanitarian training, which I don't know if that's true or not. That'll be, hopefully we'll post that later on Grayzone, and then maybe if someone knows that that's not the case, we can call them out for lying there. But it's crazy. Yeah, we're paying Ukrainian pensions. We're paying, as you mentioned, the small business loans. We're paying for seeds and fertilizers for their farmers amid a government shutdown. And it's just, I mean, we're going well beyond humanitarian aid. We're providing like SBA loans to, you know, Ukrainian businesses. And it's the only reason they need all this help is because half their country is destroyed. And that could have been avoided had we, before the war even started, had we helped, you know, facilitate referendums in Crimea and the Donbass, where, as I said, they want to secede. That was one of Putin's demands. That was one of Zelensky's campaign promises, was holding those referendums. You know, we could have prevented this whole thing from happening, and we wouldn't need to be funneling a bunch of money over there. And I think the problem is, you know, a lot of organizations are enriching themselves from these donations. They're skimming a little off the top. They're overcharging for the weapons and whatever. So it's really messed up. I mean, so they kind of blew me off at Pentagon, but that's a really good, the way you phrased it there is very good. Like, why are we still paying when our government's shutting down and when we're barely giving any money to people in Hawaii? I might try that one on some congressional representatives.
Yeah, because with that, I think that's a good transition. I'm extremely jealous that you are able to call out so many of these politicians. We cover quite a few of your videos.
Come over here, man. I can't stand it in DC.
It's gonna happen.
It really weighs on me. My parents live in Florida, and I visit them whenever I can. I hate DC so much, but come out here, man. Just all you need is a phone, and bother these people.
Yeah, when I say it's gonna happen, you guys gotta understand. RBN is still very young. Like, we only 2 years old, and things that I want to do. I want to cover. I want to go overseas and cover foreign policy one day, but going to DC is definitely something that can happen down the line. And calling out these squad members to their face. I'm pissed because my Congressperson Emmanuel Cleaver, who obviously a pro-war pig, owned by Wall Street, owned by real estate developers, they're like never town halls. I've been looking up because I always wanted that big viral moment. I've been waiting for this ever since I started my work in citizen journalist. And I want to see a town hall with Emmanuel Cleaver. Let's call him out for funding Ukraine proxy war. He doesn't do it. But all the town halls, everything in DC. So that may be something that RBN will do in the future as we continue to grow. Maybe we be in DC and have these great videos that you produce. So for people who don't know what we're talking about, do you want time in real quick? Go ahead.
I just said I'll keep an eye out for Cleaver. I think I've seen him around here and there.
Dude, if you can get that clip from me, that would be absolutely glorious.
100%. I'll try to do that. Yeah.
That'll be glorious. So if you people who don't know what we're talking about, this is your latest work. This is you calling out the noted anti-fascist AOC for her thoughts on Canadian Parliament honoring a Nazi, and considering how much AOC talk about the threat of fascism, and also considering that as socialists and these Nazis are our ideological enemy or number one enemy, you would think that AOC would have a passionate
you would think
message ready. You would think, right? Anyway, let's play this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Quick comment for the Grayzone. Were you concerned last week when President Zelensky in Ukraine gave a standing ovation for an ex-Nazi war veteran in Canada?
Well, I mean, I think any situation like that.
It is concerning.
Thank you.
Man, she is running.
Yeah. And so by the way, at the end there, some people were confused because I kind of asked, I kind of followed up and I was like, it is concerning. She didn't say it was concerning. I re-listened. I think she said something along the lines of like, we got to think it over. But I was just like, what? I was just trying to be like, you know, what did you just say? Because she and as you'll see in this other one, this is her strategy. I mean, she uses this tone like she's about to condemn it, right? She's like, oh, you know, climb this, and then she just trails off and gets in the car, and it's like,
oh man,
condemn it. I mean, it's a Nazi. It's an actual Nazi. And then this is a similar one here where she uses.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one, but I think it'd be good to play because you said this is
quick. Yeah,
you said it's a tactical trail off of an old. So this is like a strategy that AOC done, and we reported on this stuff before. This is definitely they have a and before I play this clip, they definitely have a plan because I don't know if you saw this, but Jose Vega and a ton of people called out squad members on the Ukraine vote before, and after they was called out guard, it's clear they're like, all right, we gotta have some sort of procedure in place for whenever we called out for our imperialist votes, these issues that we do our best to avoid. So this is a strategy that AOC do, what she does. It's tactical trail off.
It might be a strategy. I was kind of wondering that myself. It might be a strategy. It might just be how her brain works. Like it just like pops in. It just kind of autopilot goes into like condemn mode. But then you can kind of see her brain click when it's like, oh wait, this is also criticizing Ukraine. Because in this one, I asked her about Gonzalo Lira, who's the U.S. citizen who's still arrested. This is back in May, but that was when he was arrested. He's still in jail. So at first her brain kind of goes, oh, imprisoning someone for speech, but then you can see it click that it's also criticizing Ukraine. So she goes, oh, wait a minute. Like, but yeah, Jose Vega's great. He's done some really great work. I would love for him to get out to DC as well.
Yeah. So you guys you have to ask yourself, what is she afraid of? Like, who's the real fucking boss? Because she knows the right answer. And this is what you're talking about when she wants to condemn it, but then she does the political calculus in her head.
Yeah.
If I say this, who's going to email me? What letter am I about to get my?
It's probably the political base. It could be donors. I haven't looked too much into AOC's kind of donations and who she, meets with in terms of lobbies. It could be guys like Schumer, like if you fall out of rank with the Democratic Party, there are powerful guys at the top like Schumer and Pelosi who can probably make your life hell. So it's probably all the above.
And so that's one thing. That's just part of why we have the thesis of it's foolish to take over the Democratic Party. Look how scared. Whatever they tell these people, they know they cannot cross a certain line. That's why she was crying at the floor vote regarding the I think it was the Iron Dome, right? When she voted president, she was crying.
Right.
Under Pelosi. Anyway, I'm prefacing so
we need more independence. We need more third parties. I mean, I'm pretty libertarian, but I'd vote for a socialist in a second if they promised to get us out of the Ukraine war. And if they ran on an independent ticket, I'd vote for them in a second. So, if we unite both populist left and right, could easily, get a couple members of Congress in there. I imagine there are enough of us who are just kind of sick of these wars.
Yeah, and I don't listen to the ineffective CIA-infested Bernie Sanders love because they hate the idea of working with any libertarian or anyone who's not centrally a liberal on issues. But my litmus test is very fucking simple. If you're not anti-war, anti-imperialist, I'm not interested in you. Like you guys see, I only bring on guests like Leon himself, other Grayzone members, other anti-imperialists. And that's the starting point. Like if we can meet on being anti-imperialist, then we can work our way around the issues. If we can't meet there, there's no conversation to be had.
Yeah,
and
you should bring on others, man. Though, if they'll agree and just give them a hard time and tell them your point of view. I've been trying to set up this debate project with an outlet. We haven't launched yet, so I can't reveal it. But I've wanted nothing more, and I've been asking members of Congress too to come debate, go talk to the other side, and debate these issues like Ukraine. So. If people will agree, if you can get some sort of neocon weirdo to come on and talk to you, by all means do it. And you'd be doing a service by trying to persuade people like that.
Yeah, so I think we did a lot of prefaces. Let's check it out. I don't think I've seen this one.
Last week, a U.S. citizen was detained in Ukraine because he, quote, publicly justified the Russian invasion. How do you feel about our allies detaining our citizens for speech?
Well, I mean, in general, I think any detention over speech is,
would it affect your support
I
for
have to go. Pardon? Sorry.
Would it affect your support for Ukraine?
No. I mean, I don't know what you're referring to, so I would have to.
I did see this, and that's exactly the strategy. You gotta see how she starts to say the good thing, right? We all know she's full of shit, but she's like, yeah, I think detaining people on the speech and trail off, and then she moves without answering the question.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I say, would this affect your support for them? And she's like, no, but no, I don't like. she doesn't want to emphatically take one position.
You're frying her brain in real time. Sorry, what you say about you frying her brain in real time?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, it was just like at first she's like, well, no, it wouldn't support my opinion for Ukraine, but then she has to also caveat that because that would mean she's supporting this imprisonment of a journalist. So, no, it's a great moment. I'm glad. I got to be careful out there because so Jamal Bowman, if you've seen my Jamal Bowman clip,
yes, we have. We covered quite a few of them.
He won't talk to me anymore. In fact,
yeah, he's pissed.
I got a pretty funny clip. Right after that AOC one, where I tried to talk to him. I'm trying to get Max to post it, but he won't talk to me anymore. He's just like, I'm not talking to you, man. I'm not talking to you. And so I brought up the Nazi thing with him, and he just stands there and got on the phone with someone. He's like, not talking to you, man. And so that's why I got.
What a scumbag!
Because I embarrassed him because I put out he didn't know what Crimea and the Donbass were.
Yes,
and he said I'm never talking to this guy again. So that's kind of the trick out there is like, maybe I should wear a disguise for everyone.
Have a fake mustache.
Yeah, seriously, I might actually do that. It's not a bad idea.
Fake mustache, have like a headband on, maybe sunglasses. They don't want to tell who you are. But Jamal Bowman is a scumbag of. He's a once in a generation sellout. Like I rank him worse than AOC or anyone else because the second that he was endorsed and praised by Obama, that's when he's like, I'm out. See ya. Yeah. I'm out here. And the fact that he thinks he has the right as a public servant to silence and mute a reporter asking him questions, I guess you're technically allowed to do that. But we lived in a rational society. Any left will reject that guy. The DSA still haven't expelled Jamal Bowman, a guy who can't even talk to reporters. It's unbelievable what that guy has become.
They should. Are you in touch with their leadership? They should totally call him out. I'll send him the emails of his staff just basically just stonewalling us on trying to talk to him because we've been trying to be fair with him. We didn't edit anything. We posted the full clip. It's just that the video made him look like an idiot because he didn't know the first thing about the Ukraine war, and yet he's sending our money to Ukraine, which is irresponsible. So I mean, but yeah, if you know the DSA guys, put some pressure on Bowman because
there's one based as DSA chapter, which I'm not even sure is a DSA chapter anymore. I think they got expelled because they're too based. DSA Madison, who wanted to expel Jamal Bowman because his votes over Israel, and they got in trouble. And I can't speak too much on it because I don't want to get her in trouble because she told me all this stuff in confidence. They got in trouble because they were trying to expel Jamal Bowman, essentially.
Interesting. Wow.
And there have been a lot of pressure among the grassroots people in DSA who I never go after. When I talk about DSA, I'm not talking about these people. I'm not talking about the grassroots people who want to do good, right? I'm talking about the DSA leadership who they understand the role, that their role is to shepherd people in the Democratic Party and to trick the people underneath them to fall in that route. And a lot of people who are smart, and that's why DSA membership has plummeted recently. But
yeah, so I got to say, I mean, just real quick, this is one of the reasons I find DC so disgusting is because there's so many examples of things like that where it's like Bowman gets the endorsement from Obama. He starts changing what he stands for. The DSA gets this affiliation with Bowman. They start, changing their principles to appease Bowman, who likes them. DC is this like cesspool of like think tanks and politicians who all want access to one another. And so everyone's compromising on principles to get that access. And then, when you do that, people just bullshit. They can't tell the truth. They don't answer basic questions. It's why I sometimes get like just so sick of this place. And
yeah, I don't blame you,
I think
man.
that kind of that dynamic you just described of with DSA and Bowman and Obama really illustrates what it is that is so gross about DC.
Yeah, Maxwell Frost, he quickly Jamal Bowman level. He literally infiltrated Palestinian groups. He infiltrated DSA. He made all these promises to Palestinians, and then the second he won his primary, he essentially told them to lose his number. He didn't return their calls. Literally just started ghosting them and became a Maxwell Frost. He's the quote unquote first Gen Z congressperson. Let me see if I can find something for my books. Let's see if I can find one.
Oh, is he a state level congressman or is he
he's a Maxwell Alejandro Frost. Man, okay. I got so much stuff in my books.
I looked him up. I don't think I've seen this guy, but I'll keep an eye out for him too. And that's a great question for him right there. Why did you support Palestine and what not anymore.
Oh yeah, get his ass because he JB's.
I've never seen this guy, but I'll keep an eye out for him.
Our RBN member, JB Font. This is his representative, and he's the newest. He's the newest generation of progressives, and AOC. They all love this guy. He's the newest guy that everyone loves, right? Look, listen to this. How Florida progressive Maxwell Frost courted Palestinians, then abandoned them.
Wow.
Frost was backed by Palestinian organizers from day one on his campaign, but they say he broke many of the promises he made to him. One of them was he made a staunch BDS pledge, right? And then as soon as he won the primary, he abandoned it immediately. Like that's just an example.
What's BDS? Sorry, Israel is not really my strong suit.
A boycott, divestment, and sanctions. That's the way that people can non-violently protest the Israeli violent genocide against the Palestinian people.
Okay.
So it's one of the things that many Palestinian groups call for. And Maxwell Frost was like, yeah, I support BDS. I support the right. Remember, and this is in Florida where Ron DeSantis and many Republicans made it illegal essentially to speak out against BDS. There was a teacher who, for supporting BDS. There was a teacher who was fired. It's one of the things that I'll bring up whenever right wing.
Yeah, and then Ron, and then he went to Israel for some reason. The governor of Florida is going to Israel to do a meeting.
Yeah, it's one of the things I bring up as a counter whenever like right wingers pretend they for the freedom of speech and First Amendment, because when you crack down on BDS, that's literally a crackdown on the First Amendment. They're preventing.
Yeah.
I want to go ahead.
DeSantis has been a big disappointment. I mean, I was my parents moved there during COVID. We were originally from Florida, but we were in California. So he was good on COVID. He didn't close down too many businesses, but he's been a huge disappointment whenever I hear him talk about the war, when I hear him talk about Israel and things like that. And even the border. I'm a pretty pro-immigration guy, and he's just said some wild things about the immigrants. I mean, he said we're going to use drones and strike the cartel and things like that, and we should have no sympathy for the immigrants. But on Maxwell Frost, I don't know how you do that. Like I don't know. I mean, I imagine
so evil.
I imagine it's easier. You know, it's obviously like there's a real chance, like if you're in Maxwell Frost's position, where if like the all these pro-Israel groups like AIPAC and ADL, like if they come after you, you might lose your seat. But like if that's the core issue you run on, this is like one of your core principles, then man up and lose. I just couldn't live with myself.
I couldn't either.
Caving on all these different things. I mean, to me, the war in Ukraine is the most important thing that needs to end. So I might cave on anything but getting that through. But yeah, I don't like so many of these politicians. They just cave on so much that it's like, I wonder how they live with themselves.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I appreciate your time. I'm gonna let you go here. So I'm just interested. I want to pick your brain on something real quick, because you say you're more of you libertarian leaning. You say you disappointed regarding Ron DeSantis' stance on the border. Now, I am very unapologetically quote unquote radical. I question the function and need of a border. I think it's a mechanism to control workers, and you have the ruling class, the capitalist class. Borders don't really exist for them. You have factories that move around. Bill Gates and all these billionaires, they move around whenever they want. And you say you have criticisms of Ron DeSantis on immigration. That's why I was just curious. Like, I was just interested in your thoughts on that. And the libertarian. And I want you also to, because you hang around libertarians more than I do. That's why I'm asking you this as well. Like, what is the general thought on libertarians on this? Because as far as I'm concerned, there used to be like a libertarian issue regarding freedom of movement. So I'm asking you just out of curiosity.
Yeah, 100%. No, the libertarian position is that you're for open borders. It has changed a bit with guys like, Dave Smith, who I love. I don't know if you know that guy. He's a comedian. Dave Smith is awesome. He is pro border security. But I totally agree with you. I think you can reach a situation where there is chaos, but I think it's like most of those people are good people who just want to work. So let them in. If they come here and they commit a crime, if we weren't wasting so much of our government spending on things like Ukraine, things like our military bases and our 700 military bases in all these other countries, we might be able to afford, a police force that can arrest immigrants who commit a crime. And then you wouldn't need to worry about all these people coming in. I mean, like my parents disagree with me on this. And one of the big talking points that my mom always says is like, we need to know who's coming in. And I'm just like what you need, what you want their name? Like, why do you, you're not going to, no matter like the government's you're not going to be able to get a whole history from these people and a whole record. Like it's just not going to happen. It just takes way too long, costs way too much money to even do that in the first place. And I agree with you. It's like a freedom of movement thing. It's like when my girlfriend is Italian, and when I go to Europe's a bit easier to deal with when the US, but like when I come back to the US and fly back and the customs line takes like 2 hours to get through. And then you walk up to the customs guy and he's like, hey, you got anything to declare? Nope. Okay, go ahead. I'm just like, what the hell was that about? Like that's obviously a very minor issue, but it's like, I want to be able to go to Mexico. I want to be able to go to Europe. I want to be able to go to China.
Yeah, the same thing I said.
And I want everyone to be able to fluidly, because it's like, it's such a pain in the ass when you're preemptively treated like a threat. And it takes months to get some like stupid visa or whatever for totally like arbitrary reasons oftentimes. It's a whole mess. There's a ton of money spent enforcing it. And just as a matter of principle, I want to be able to leave my country whenever I want. I want to be able to come back whenever I want. So I am very pro. We agree on immigration for sure.
Yeah, your perspective was definitely interesting. And that's how I originally reached my conclusion as well, going through like TSA and shit. I'm like, what is like we should be able to move. Like, what the fuck? Exactly. If I want to live in Mexico, I should be able to live in Mexico. And now people say, go ahead.
Because a group of, 9/11, we don't have to get into too much 9/11 stuff. I haven't looked into the conspiracy too much, but like, to me, there's just so many. The Anthrax attacks, which came right after 9/11, which they blamed on Saddam. If you look into that conspiracy, 100%. That was the U.S. government. It came so Anthrax, real quick, happens right after 9/11, like a couple of weeks after. There's this like fake letter in the mail with the anthrax, and it's like claiming to be a jihadist doing it. And then they're like, oh, they blame it on Saddam Hussein. They're like, oh, there's this thing in the anthrax that only could have been Saddam. Then it's forensically analyzed by a private company, which finds it's actually from Fort Detrick, Maryland, U.S. military base. So they're totally caught with their pants down. What do? They blame it on a scientist from that base. They say he was crazy. Right before he's about to testify, commits suicide. So
of course.
That's one of those things where it's like, and this was a long caveat of like the U.S. government, and then there's also Grayzone actually did some reporting on like we knew that this attack was about to happen.
I'm gonna just say this.
We let it happen, and then we create the TSA. I would bring it back to TSA. We create the TSA because of this thing that we helped cause. And then, like, now everyone, normal citizens have to, like, take their shoes off. It's a huge pain in the ass. And, like
it doesn't work. And it doesn't work.
It's preemptive policing. Like, you're assuming everyone's guilty. Just, I would happily get on a plane without scanning everyone. Like, I don't think most people are terrorists. I'm totally willing to take the risk. I wish I could have the option to opt out of TSA.
Yeah, and most importantly, it doesn't work. I'm calling people, does it work? Does it not work?
That's the most important point as well.
And I'm just saying this just because this is my belief, because like I said, I lay within facts, but I'm into conspiracy because humans conspiring is a fact, right?
100%. I'm into conspiracies as well.
Like, that's the thing people do.
I'm into conspiracies as well. I just, I'm hoping, State Department people aren't watching and they're like, oh my God, Liam thinks 9/11 inside job.
You guys realize human history is literally a collective of human conspiracy theories. Conspiracies are literally a group of people getting together and conspiring something. That's literally almost every single major human event is at some point people got together and conspire some things. So that's why you view lens through who is conspiring right now. So I'm gonna say this because in response to your story, whenever I hear that people killed themselves, I immediately don't believe it. Because, for one, if you look at history and numbers, the spike in suicide is a really recent thing. The act of killing yourself is something that only happens with extreme mental illness or extreme duress. It is not natural in human nature to kill yourself. Once again, extremely mentally ill people do that, but you hear these stories of people, oh, this guy got sad and he killed himself. That's unnatural. People usually don't do that. So I generally don't believe that kind of stuff. So whenever I hear that some guy with a threat to the establishment killed himself, I immedially don't believe it. Someone may prove it right later. I'm like, if you show me facts that hardly prove it, I don't believe it in general. But anyway, thank you for staying with me. I'll give you last thought.
To your point of like all the conspiracies that are going on right now, because I'm talking about 9/11, Oklahoma City bombings, another super interesting one.
Absolutely.
These things get declassified later on and or journalists uncover them later on, like Seymour Hersh with MK Ultra, and Nord Stream was actually pretty quick. But it is so frustrating. I wish there were more people out there digging, because I would love to know all the stuff that's going on right now, and it's actually really important that we do know about it with how crazy this conflict in Ukraine is getting. But yeah, I when I have time, I dig into a little bit of that stuff myself, like the Epstein type stuff. If there's people out there, do some digging, man. Send it to us, because it's all fascinating. When you learn about things like that.
Yep. If you think Epstein killed yourself, I'll be nice. You're very naive. You're very naive.
Trump. You remember that interview with Trump and Tucker Carlson? Like I'll
that.
vote for Trump probably because I think he'll end the Ukraine war. But that was just Tucker was interviewing him, and Trump was like, "Did you see this?" Trump was like, "Oh, I think he might have killed himself. I don't know."
Yeah, I called that out because Tucker gave him a tongue bath, pathetic interview in my eyes.
100%,
that's the only time. That's the only time that he asked him a somewhat tough question, and then Trump buckled. Anyway, I'm gonna read a few more super chats because I know you short on time. There's a few here, and I get you out here. Thanks for 999, John. AOC equals NATO Barbie. Fantastic comment. I started this earlier because I saw this. I couldn't believe it. So I'll show this one actually a little bit later. I just want to give a shout out to a few super stickers I see. Thanks for $10 dried brain freeze. Another $2 from Fred Stanley. And I say this from laugh because I saw a few people leaving this comment and I didn't believe you. I did. So I waited till a few more other people left the comment until I fact checked it. And this could possibly be the most hilarious thing that's going to happen this year. Cenk Uygur is apparently running for president.
Really? And, no way.
Yeah, so I went to fact check it because I saw a few people commenting on it. And I saw Glenn. So this is what Glenn tweeted about. He said, breaking. The Young Turks' Cenk Uygur announces today that he's likely running for president as a Democrat. Jesus fucking Christ. I cannot wait to see CJ's reaction to this. This is fucking hilarious.
How is he on Ukraine?
Horrible.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. He's I remember in the beginning of the war, he said, we got to mobilize. We got to fight Putin. We got to fight the Russians. If I search my history, I might be able to find a video because I definitely roasted him.
Yeah, I've heard him talk a little bit. I just wasn't sure. I haven't heard him make too many strong statements. That's hilarious. I mean, I wonder if he has any chance. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. The reason I say that because he ran before and he only got 6% in a local election, and Cenk is one of the people that have no constituency because the people who are truly anti-imperialist and left hate him.
Yeah,
liberals hate him because
like you and others like you don't like him anymore. So it's like, it's hard to see who his base even is.
Yeah. So anyway, this is funny. Like, what are you running on?
If he was good,
he agrees with Biden. He agreed with Biden on Ukraine, for example. So
that's a good point. How are you differentiating yourself at all? Yeah.
That's why I say about Marianne Williamson. I think her candidacy is a joke. You agree with Biden on Ukraine and foreign policy. What the fuck you running for? But anyway, you guys know that me and CJ are going to have a funny-ass breakdown on this. This is a breaking news story. I cannot wait to see CJ's reaction to this. But everyone was spamming our chat with that. And I see Glenn is commenting on it. He's trending on Twitter right now. So, man, it's going to be fucking funny. That's all I'm going to say. So we're probably going to cover that here soon. Thank you for joining us, Liam, and I appreciate your time. Any plugs you have, and I would love to have you on again in the future. It was a good.
Of course, I'd love to come back. Thanks so much for inviting me. The only plug is my Twitter. Really, that's the only thing I'm on. So the tag is right there on the screen at Cosgrove_IV. Give me a follow, and I hope to get you guys more content on the Hill. I gotta check the vote schedule. Maybe I'll head out there tonight.
Yeah, we actually cover your content a lot. Like you're the guy who did Jamal Bowman. We pretty much cover all those viral videos. So we love the service you're providing for us. So thank you for joining us once again. I'm gonna pop you in the back. Lynn Cosgrove, ladies and gentlemen, from the Grayzone. We love the ladies and gentlemen at the Grayzone here at RBN. We love anyone who actually generally know who the enemy is and calling out empire. So I think we have Savvy and JV tonight. We have RBN content tomorrow. I think CJ going live. He couldn't go live today, but I hope you guys enjoyed this interview. We got content all the time. We have our Patreon in the description if you enjoy this content. It helps us continue to produce these kind of shows. So appreciate you guys for watching. Have a good one. Peace out.